First, I want to thank everybody that has subscribed, liked, commented. I appreciate everything that you've said. No matter what you've said, I appreciate the likes. Please share this with your friends. Make sure you smash the like button. Make sure you hit that share button. We're trying to make sure that everybody know that they're not victims, that they're empowered for greatness, that we can make a difference again in this nation. That we can stand up for biblical values, we can stand up for truth and push back against all the lies and everything that's false that's taking place in this land. So I appreciate that. And please, thank you for looking at my videos and participating and making our voice known. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it looks like Madison Cawthorn has got himself in the hot water again. Being a resident of North Carolina, I'm somewhat familiar with Madison Cawthorn, and I agree with him when it comes to his America First platform and his focus on returning the power back to the people, because Washington D.C. has become the swamp. And unfortunately, there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats at this point, especially for people that have been up there for a long period of time. So what he has done now is that he went on a podcast last week called The Warrior Poet, I believe. And he talked about how Congress was very similar to that Netflix show House of Cards with Kevin Spacey and I believe Robin Wright Penn. I think she was in that as well. And he talked about how that they actually have orgies, that he was invited to an orgy and he's seen members of Congress smoking drugs, smoking crack and all kind of stuff. So let's take a listen and then we'll come back and talk about it.
How much, in your opinion, because you've been behind the veil, is this fictitious show, or is this more closer to like a documentary? Is it that bad?
So I heard a former president that we had in the 90s was asked the question about this, and he gave an answer that I thought was so true. And he said, the only thing that's not accurate in that show is that you could never get a piece of legislation about education passed that quickly.
And everything else is good?
Aside from that, I mean, the sexual perversion that goes on in Washington, I mean, being kind of a young guy in Washington with the average age of probably 60 or 70, and I look at all these people, a lot of them that I've looked up to through my life, I've always paid attention to politics, guys that, then all of a sudden you get invited to, like, well, hey, we're gonna have kind of a sexual get together at one of our homes, you should come. And I'm like, what did you just ask me to come to? Yeah. And then you realize they're asking you to come to an orgy. Yeah. Or the fact that there's some of the people that are leading on the movement to try and remove addiction in our country, and then you watch them do a key bump of cocaine right in front of you, and it's like, wow, this is wild. And then there's also kind of the whole espionage aspect of what goes on in Washington of so many people trade in secrets, and there's a currency to secrets, and so. It's wild. And then there's members of the media, the journalists, who kind of will keep nasty stories about you or about other people on a shelf. And then if you're about to kind of speak out against something they don't want you to, they'll come out and say, well, we're about to drop the story of when 17 years ago you did X, Y, and Z, and you don't want us to drop that story, do you? So we're going to bully you back into this position.
So as you can see, those are very, very salacious statements. The simple fact that he was invited to an orgy and he's seen people smoking crack, I mean, those are very unflattering and inflammatory kind of statements. Well, looks like that some of that was exaggerated, according to him, because he was called into the principal's office. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy called him on the carpet and had him come in, and Madison Cawthorn admitted that he exaggerated some of those things and that the things that he mentioned weren't exactly factual. And see, that's the problem. Look, when we have people that are running for office and they are representing Americans, we have to always keep in mind that nobody's perfect, that we have to understand that once you get into a position of influence, You have to be measured with your words. And that's what got former President Trump into trouble. While he had a number of things that I agree with, the masculinity, the strong will, the America First policies, those things were great. But he said a number of things that were offensive to a lot of people, and he never apologized and rectified those things. And so he turned off a lot of people. And Madison Cawthorn is doing the exact same thing. He has great policies, but people will not listen to your policies if they find you abrasive and find you argumentative and combative. There's a time and place. You have to be wise. The Bible talks about how a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. You have to know. You have to be wisdom. You have to use skillful and godly wisdom. Because I understand what people like Madison Cawthorn and people like former President Trump were doing. They were trying to get up there and make sure that America's citizens are no longer victims. Because we have been turned into victims by bureaucrats that are up in Washington, D.C., the ones that are not elected, the ones, the shadow government, like I call it, the people that are there, the Faucis of the world, the people that are not elected, but the people that are ones that are determining policies and things like that. Those are the folks that are turning Americans into victims. They are trying to implement socialism and communism into this land. But we are not victims. We are empowered for greatness. But for Madison Cawthorn to say that life imitates art, if you will, that Congress is like that show House of Cards without any evidence, is detrimental to the real corruption that takes place in Washington, D.C. It's detrimental to the real things that happen behind the scenes that are not positive and beneficial for the American people. So I will hope he comes out and clarifies his statements, comes out and admits that these things are exaggerated and this is rectified. It paints them in a bad light because now they're going to be asked questions like, oh wow, were you invited to an orgy? Were you invited to a drug party? Did you smoke crack? Have you smoked crack? So now everybody's looking at them questionable. And see, that's what things like that does when you make comments like that, inflammatory comments like that, without having real factual evidence to back it up. It's irresponsible and it's immature. No matter who the person is, we cannot afford to have immaturity or irresponsibility or irrational people in those positions. We need people that will fight for America, people that will fight for us, but at the same time are rational and wise people. Those are the people we need running for office. Because we are not victims, we are empowered for greatness, but we need people that have that same mindset, that want to implement educational opportunities for people of color in the communities, but at the same time can communicate that message in a way that's not abrasive. That's what we need. So Madison Cawthorn, he was called on the carpet for saying that Congress, in particular the House of Representatives, was like a house of cards. Who knows if he was truly exaggerating or if he experienced these. He says he was exaggerating, or Kevin McCarthy said that he was exaggerating some of the things he said. Who knows? Either way, we are not victims. We are empowered for greatness. Thank you so much for liking your comments and subscribing to the channel. Please share this with your friends. Smash that like button. Smash the subscription bell. Share this with everybody you know. We're trying to make sure people understand that they're not victims, that they are empowered for greatness, and all this stuff that's out here that's telling them otherwise is false and will not benefit them in the end. So please, I appreciate that. Share that.